Welcome. My name is Yvonne Allen. I currently work for NCR as a full stack developer, and I'm part of Women Who Code. So that's a little bit about me. Yeah, so all my Women Who Coders up in here. What's up? Thank you for coming to my talk. So basically, I'm just going to be talking to you about schematics. I don't know why that's doing that. But yeah, so schematics in the context of Angular, but just to let you know, you don't have to use Angular in order to use schematics. I'm just showing you how to use schematics in the Angular context. So you're probably wondering, like, you know, what is this schematic thing all about? You know, you probably think if you use Angular before, you're probably thinking like this is a completely new concept, but it's not. You've actually already used Angular before using the Angular CLI. So most people don't even know that. But you know, like you're probably wondering like, what is schematics? So schematics is basically a workflow tool that allow you to generate files and transform them. A good example of that would be using ng-new to create a new component, or using ng-add to add extra functionality like dashboards or adding Ionic to your project. So those are two good examples of using the Angular schematic CLI as is. Now, in order to use schematics in our example, we're going to be creating an Angular project, and we're going to be creating a schematics project. And in order to create an Angular project, you do these simple steps, which is basically do npm install to install the Angular CLI, and then you do ng-new and give your project a name. In our case, I'm calling it demo. And then you go directly into the project you just created by navigating into it using cd, and then your project name. And then you do ng-serve to start the Angular server, which is, if you've used Angular, you already know this, but if you have not, this is like a intro to how to create an Angular project using the Angular CLI. Now, in order to create a schematics project, you use the schematic CLI, which are kind of the same thing, but not really. So schematics, the schematic CLI is more generalized, and the Angular CLI is actually Angular agnostic. I'm saying Angular based. So the schematic CLI is Angular agnostic. Now, in order to do that, only thing you have to do is first make sure you have node installed 6.9 or higher, and do npm install, and then the schematics package name, which is angular-devkit/schematics-CLI. And then what you do is create a blank schematics project, and the way you would do that is use schematics blank dash name equals whatever your project is, whatever you're calling your project. In our case, I'm going to be calling it Gothman City. So, and then after that, you would navigate into the schematics project, and then you would do npm install to install all your dependencies. And then you're done. That's it. Like, you thought there would be more, but there's not, because schematics in Angular is so cool. You know what I'm saying? You get everything super easy, simple, nothing much. The dependencies are installed already for you using the npm, so you don't have to go find all these libraries and like try to worry about compatibility with versions. None of that. It's just, that's it. Now, sorry, I don't need that one. So let's just copy. So I'm gonna leave that right quick. But so next thing I want to do is kind of we're gonna dive into the schematics projects. The schematics project and the Angular project I just told you about, in order to show you the project structure of what a schematics project looks like, and use that in order to first take creating a component and creating a service and combine them together, and showing you how to use the schematic CLI to do that in order to reduce the amount of steps you have to do for our project. And let me show you this game. So the way that I'm doing this is using a game. So I figure, you know, it's nice to do some coding and all that, but to help you relate to it, we're going to use a game in order to use schematics in order to scaffold out our villain and our super villain and our superhero and have them battle it out. But we're going to use schematics to do that. So let's dive into that. here at face value, okay. Oh, sorry. I don't know anything about why that does that. But anyway, so here is our game. So our game is placed in Gotham City, not Gotham City, because we have an alternate reality, the angular Gotham City reality. And we have a supervillain called Bane. So it's kind of a spinoff of the Dark Knight Rises movie. Have anybody ever seen that one? Okay. For those of you who doesn't, there's a villain and his name is Bane. So that's why we created a super villain called Bane. But right now, our project doesn't do anything. You know, you have a super villain, and you know, it's envision. You know, that's just a dot, but let's envision. You know, he has like a gun and a knife, and he's out to do bad things. But I'm not a graphic designer, so I can't do all that. But right now, he's out to do bad things. And now we got to create a superhero in order to battle him and defeat him. And we're going to do that using Angular schematics. So let's dive into what that looks like. All right. So here we are. We have a basic structure of a schematics project. So first, let's just assume that we did the basic command to install it, create a new schematics project, which is schematics blank dash name, and we did Gotham City. And then we went ahead and did npm install to install our dependencies. For the sake of time, let's just assume that that's what we did. And now you have our project structure. So right now, the first schematic you'll see, so you have the name of the project, the project or package, if you're in the npm world, is called Gotham City. And then you have our first schematic. So the schematic is in its own folder, and it's also by default called Gotham City. So let me show you how that works. So first, the one important thing I want you to see is if you go into package.json, you have this dependency, this property called schematics right here. So this property is really important because it's the base for everything else that happens in your Angular project. I'm saying in your schematics projects. And so let's go, and it's called collections.json. So let's go to the collections.json file and show you what that looks like. So inside of collections.json, which is where your package.json points to, you will see your schematic. So when you're looking at this, you're seeing collections.json. And you're like, what is a collection? Like, what value does it have to me? What does that word really mean? So a collection in schematics is basically a list of schematics. So that's all that really is. And so when you see here, that property called schematics is listing your first schematic of your project. And by default, when you do schematics blank, that command, what you're doing is it also what it does is scuffles out a Angular schematic, a schematic for you, and give it the same name of that project. Now, it does not have to stay that way. You can delete that one. It doesn't matter. But just to get you up and running, it automatically does that for you. So you can see how to format the rest of your schematics as you go along throughout your project. So the first thing you see there is that property $sign schema. That basically, you get that by default. It's basically the schema you're going to be using to validate your JSON properties and files that you're going to properties that you're going to be using in this file. And then the next thing you have right there, the most important thing right there is this Gotham City. So when you're doing this and when you're creating a schematic, there are some rules. You cannot use uppercase letters. You cannot use spaces. You have to use dashes. So this is why I use Gotham-City to create the schematic name. And then the next thing, excuse me. Then the next thing is the description. So description is basically how you're going to describe what the schematic is. So if someone just comes into your collections.json file and want to see, a list of all of your schematics, they can go here, and then get like a brief description of what's all in what all schematics you have and kind of what they do. And then the next thing is a factory. So the factory is where all your rules are. And right here you see schematic's name and then index. And the index is basically where all of your rules are going to be for your schematic. And then Gotham City, which is just going to be the name of the first rule that's going to hit in your rule factory. So let's go there to the index.ts file because that's the next important file. So in your index.ts file, you're seeing that exact same name, Gotham City, which is your first rule. So what is a rule? So a rule is something that does a bunch of transforms to your tree and then spits out another tree. Now he's like, okay, you told me what a rule is. That was confusing. I kind of get that. Now what's a tree, right? You know, this is another new term. I don't know any of these terms. They're not really very familiar to me. So a tree is something that is a structure that holds your file system in your changing area. So if you can think of a changing area, like if you're using Git, right? So you have your initial file structure, your project structure before any changes happened, and then you have all the working tree, which is the list of all your changes that happened right before you started making any changes. So that's what a tree is. It holds that structure so that you can make changes and go either revert back if something happens to your initial file structure before all those changes happen. So you have both of those in that tree object. So now that you see that, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the add component. So, but before we go there, I just want to show you, just give you an example of what we're about to do in this schematic by using the Angular CLI. Because right now what we're going to do is create a new component. But before we dive into it in this more convoluted way, I want to show you just simply what we're about to do. So if we navigate over to our demo, awesome. We're gonna just simply create just a simple component. So the way you do that in Angular is you would say ng generate and then you say C, right? Because C in Angular world, that's just a short way for saying component because sometimes you just don't want to, it's just an alias. And then we're gonna give it a name, Ivy. So there's another villain character called Ivy. And we're going to let Angular spin that up. Sometimes it takes a moment when you first start in the project. Awesome. So there you go. There you have it. That's exactly what we're about to do. So what just happened here, for people who don't really know what just happened, Angular created a component file that has an HTML file, which is where you use all your UI components, and then a CSS file for that exact same component, and then you create a TS file, which is where all your logic is going to happen. Okay. And then it updated the app.module file to add that new component to that. Before I continue, does anybody else use like Angular or any other front end framework like React or anything like that? Okay, so just to see where my audience is, to make sure I'm not just completely losing y'all. If I'm losing you, just say you lost me, okay? And I'll be like, all right, I'm gonna backtrack if we have time. So schematics will. And so that's why I try to differentiate to you the difference between the Angular CLI and schematics. So this is that command ng new, that's the Angular CLI. And then the next one I'm going to do is showing you how to do it using the schematic CLI, so you can be in any project. Okay. So heading back to that, so we're going to do this exact same thing, but we're going to use the schematic CLI to do it now. And so let's hop back over to our schematics projects, and I'll show you how we're going to show you how we do that. Okay, so back in our schematics project now, you will see here that we are using, we're doing add component. So basically add component, we're gonna go straight up, go right above that to the, where it says add component, you see we use a method called chain. So chain in schematics is a rule, just like how we have our first rule here at Gotham City, that will allow you to chain different actions in order to compound them on top of each other to do one particular thing. So in our case, we're going to create a component, then we're going to create a service in order to have action. So like when I click on the superhero, it's going to attack the super villain, but that's going to be done in the service. So we have to compound those two actions together using a chain. But right now, since I'm just showing you how we do that exact same thing we did in Angular CLI inside of schematics, we're gonna we have just one method, but just one action, but we're gonna compound on that. So let's go. Now that I showed you this and how that works, hold on 1 second. Before that, there's something more important that I need to show you. So in order to do that, we have another method called external schematics. So external schematics allows you to import other schematics into your project. So right now you have a project that you're creating custom, but there's also already other schematics out there, schematics packages that does some functionalities and things that you can import into your project, so you don't have to recreate the wheel. So if you found a schematics project out there on npm or on GitLab that does something that you already need to do, you don't have to do that again. Just pull their project, their schematic in, and use that first, and then you can build on that. So that's what external schematics, that's what that is for. Now, what we're saying is schematics Angular. So that is Angular's package. And what you're saying, I want to use the component schematic in order to inside of my schematic, my rule that I'm doing right now. And then you're giving it options. So the options, we're going to talk a little bit more about that later, but options come from the command line. So when I did -- name, when I created my first schematic, that was an option from the command line that is read into your schematic, and you can do stuff with it. So that's what that's for. So what we're going to do is take that same thing, and we're going to use that in our Angular project in order to create a component as well. But right as it stands, it seems like we're just kind of recreating the wheel, but we're not. We're going to compound on top of that. So let's do that. So after you do, we're assuming that I created that code just now. First of all, the first thing you have to do, once you anytime you make a change to your Angular project, your schematics project, you're going to have to say npm run build. So using that command there, it will build your project and test to make sure you don't have any errors, and then it will then recompile to the node modules, your global node modules folder. So let's just do that. Boom. So I didn't get any errors. So if you got any errors, it will come up. If you ever seen like the errors in the command line, it'll say error, then it gives you an error. But if you don't get any errors, it looks just like that. Now, the next thing you do is you do npm link. So what that does, you only have to do this on the start of when you create your schematics project and your Angular project or any other project in order to create a link for this for your Angular schematics project. So when you do npm link, what happens is with npm, it'll put it in the global node modules packages, and it'll add that there. So then anytime in your schematics project, you can just pull it down from there and link it. So that way you can talk to your projects without having to do npm install every time you make a change, which if you have a lot of dependencies that you need to worry about, it can be very time consuming. So you would create that link. I've already done that, so I'm not going to redo it again, but I just wanted to show you that you had to do that. It's very important. So now that we did that, where's my mouse? Let's go back. to our demo. Okay, so now that we're here, the way that you connect these two together is you do npm link, and then the name of your schematics project, which is Goth Men City, just like that. Okay, so that right there now creates a link between your schematics project and your Angular project on your dev environment, so that you don't have to do npm installs all the time. So it's very important that you do that, because if you do not do that, your Angular project will not, or any other project will not know about your schematics projects, and it will not update properly, and it will fail. So now that we did that, let's use our schematics in order to add a new component using the schematics CLI and not the schematics project. So you go ng. Because we're still in the Angular context, you still use ng generate. But this time, now instead of using the Angular schematics, you're going to use a schematic from your schematics project, and that's Goth Men, and then you do this colon. So that's the name of the package, and then you're going to say the name of the schematic. And sorry, I forgot city. And then you're going to do Goth Man City, because we named it the same thing. Let's make sure nope, I spelled city wrong. Just like that. And then we're going to say -- name, and we're going to say equals, and we're going to do, I don't know, what's another villain character? Huh? Riddler. Is that how you spell that? I don't know. It's going to call it that. It's close enough. Awesome. So now you see that just happened. So we use the the schematic CLI this time to create that component, and not the Angular CLI to do that. But it's like, okay, that's cool. I mean, you kind of just, it feels redundant right now, but you know, it has a greater purpose. So this is just showing you how to do that, but with the schematic CLI instead. So if you're in another project, you can use it that way. So let's go back, and now I want to create a service, and create a service and a component at the same time in order to now create a character that would allow us to attack our supervillain, which is like the whole purpose of this whole talk, to attack our supervillain. So let's go back to that. Oh, sorry, we're already in demo. Okay, so let me put my mouse back over here. Okay, so but in order to do that, let me talk to you a little bit about the schema. So in order for us to use our service, so we're going to use the Angular CLI again, the Angular schematics again, in order to use the service. And I'm showing you how to compound them both on top of each other. But in order to do that, first thing we need is the schema.json and a schema.ts. And I'm going to show you what that looks like. So in your schema.ts, your schema.json, you have a list of your command line properties that are allowed for your schema. So you can use any, but any does not allow for validation. And you want to be able to validate, and if a user is trying to use a option on your command line that you don't offer, you need to be able to validate against that. So that's where schema.json and schema.ts come in at. Now, what you see, let's break this down right quick. So again, you have the schema property like we discussed before. We're going to validate all of our properties using that schema. But then you have ID. So ID is what you're going to be able to call your options. Like you're going to identify your options by an ID. And right here, I just called it Gotham City Options Schema. And then you have a title, which usually it's basically the same name. And then you give it a type, and we're going to give it a type of object. To saying that it's a list of objects. Then you have properties. So the most important part is properties. So properties is basically the commands, the options that you're going to have. Now, if you're using an external schema, you have to import all of those options first into your schema that you're going to use in order to use that schema. If you do not, it will fail. So that's very important that you add all of the properties, all of the properties from the schema that you're going to be using into that schema that you're creating on your own. And the reason, but you don't have to. So if you're not using the external schema, you don't have to do that. So that's why I didn't have it at first, but now we're using a schema that is from an external schematic. So then now we have it. And so let's go down, and you see all the properties that I have here. And most of these are from the Angular component schematic, and that's why we have them. And then I'm going to say that a name is required. And the next thing I did was we're going to use an interface. So interface allows for validation. And basically the same thing, all the properties that you have in your schema.json, you port them over to your schema.ts, and that way you're going to be using TypeScript interfaces in order for validation and type checking. So basically this is just going to be a list of all the properties that was in json.ts. Say schema.json. So now let's go back to our index.ts. So in our index.ts, you'll now see that you added schema, and then we had Gotham, as Gotham options, because we're gonna call them Gotham, because in bigger schematics projects, you wind up having a whole bunch of schemas, and you don't know like what that is. So we just named it Gotham options, so you know, okay, we're talking about the command line options for our Gotham City schematic and not any other one. Okay, so now you see, now we added those as options and put those in there. And now we add the service. So the reason why I showed you one before the other was because it gets quite advanced when I add the service in here. And once you get deeper and deeper in schematics, you wind up adding more methods and doing more stuff with it. So here we created another list of options for our service, because these are not the same as the ones that are in the component ones. Well, like one or two are different. And then we have another method called add service. So this is going to be able to add a service to our Angular. This is going to be able to add a service to our schematics projects, as you can see. So using the exact same method we use to create a component. So now let's see what that looks like. Okay. Oh, one other thing before, sorry, I forgot to mention this. Here we added one extra command. So the first time we just used name equals, and then we gave our villain name, which was Riddler. But this time we added a service option. So this service command options will now allow me to create a component and a service at the same time with one command. And what you see here, you will see it'll be a type of string, and then you have an alias option. So you don't have to add alias option, but I like to create alias for all the options that I have to just kind of make it short and sweet. And so the alias is SN. And that's the only other change that we had. So let's go do that. All right, so back to our demo. Let's go back to the base, branch. No, okay. Oh yeah, it's just that was just for show. Uh-oh, did that thing again. Just leave it. All right. So let's use our schematic to create a service and a component. And this time we're gonna create a superhero. Let's do Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman's kind of cool. Oops. Let's give it a name. And the service is equal. Is it already there? So there you have it. We created a component, called her Wonder Woman, and then we created a service called Attack. So see right there, instead of doing them separately using two different commands, we used one command to do so. So that is the basic power of using Angular's, of using schematics in general. Now, when you get in deeper into it, you can do more things like use it to update for breaking changes. You can also use it for adding different libraries and automatically doing the updates to the files that is required to do for that. So you can scoffle that part out. But excuse me, for our example, because there's already a lot going on, we're just using that one. So the next thing I want to show you is the next thing we have to do is add the ability to attack take our superhero and attack our supervillain. So let's add some stuff for that to see how that works. I'm gonna say to just finish out our game. Let's see, where are we? Where is my mouse? I swear. Does it have flight in there? Okay. Let's just save those. This is gonna do it anyway. Okay. Move this back over. Okay. So now the only thing we did was we let's assume that I didn't create Wonder Woman because I created Birdman instead because I used Wonder Woman because I had already created Birdman. But let's assume that we did Birdman, and then we added this service. We added this private service, fight service, fight service. So instead of doing attack, we did fight service. So we did that, and then if you use Angular, you just know you just have to create a method, and then this dot fight service dot attack. So that is our attack method in our that we just added to our component from our service. So basically, all our one thing our fight service is going to do is it's going to, every time you click on the superhero, it's going to delete the health of the supervillain by 10, and then once the health is at 0, it's going to label the superhero as the winner. So let's play around with that, see how that works in our game. So let's just start the Angular server. Oh yeah, it's already up. I forgot that. Okay, so now as you see at the beginning of our game, we only had one character, which is our supervillain. Now we have our superhero, which we call Birdman instead of playoff Batman. It's called Birdman. All right, we're gonna attack him. Boom! We hit him one time. I have bad graphics. Sorry, nothing happened, and no animations. Boom! Hit him again, and then you win. So that's just a little game we did in order to show you how to create schematics. We have a few more minutes, so if you have any questions, this will be a good time. Just if you have anything you want to know, anything about me, or just using Angular at all, if you are like front end or anything like that. Yes.
So the value of schematics to impose the commands of other frameworks.
So you don't have to use other frameworks. I just showed you an example using other frameworks to just kind of make it a little bit more simple to show you how you can use schematics in this form of Angular in order to just compound some of the things you have to do in Angular that require multiple tasks, multiple commands to do so. We just tied it into one command and did it all at once. But the value in it is that you can make updates to your files with one command, like adding more information into your files that already exist, and scoffle those out. If you have like some boilerplate code that you have to always add and you kind of get tired of adding it, you can use schematics in order to do that as well. So that's one of the main things you can do with schematics. Any other questions? Yes.
How much are you using Angular at CR?
Well, our team is an Angular house, so we use it every day. But there's other teams that use other frameworks, but our house, our department uses Angular. Ours is Digital Insight. So we're using Angular Digital Insight for the B2B side.
In your examples, you're using the NV command to use the schematics. If you have like your own internal your own framework, how does that look like to integrate schematics into your own framework?
So then schematics will be the CLI. So if you have a framework that doesn't have a CLI, schematics is going to be your CLI. And you, instead of calling it, let's say your project was like a health app, so like Diabetic Me or whatever, you probably want to create a schematic and call it like the project name is Diabetic CLI, Diabetic Me CLI, instead of Gotham City CLI, so that you'll be like schematics Diabetic Me, and then whatever your schematics name is, and then the options that way. So that's like if you don't have it already. But if you have it, like Angular has a CLI already, you're just using adding more functionality to the Angular CLI by using schematics on top of that. Anything else? Nope. Okay. Well, thank you for joining my talk, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day.